I've lived in this neighborhood for as long as I can remember. Maple Street is your typical suburban stretch, neat lawns, white picket fences, and rows of identical houses, save for slight variations in color or porch style. Nothing strange ever happened here. At least, not until that Halloween. Every year, the Wilsons, an older couple, put out the most elaborate Halloween display you could imagine. Their front yard became a haunted wonderland. Tombstones, fog machines, animatronic ghouls that popped up from behind bushes. You couldn't walk 2 feet without something buzzing, clanking, or lighting up. But the main attraction was the candy. Full-sized candy bars. I'm talking about the good stuff. Snickers, Kit Kats, and Reese's Cups. The kind of haul kids dream about all year. It wasn't just kids who loved the Wilsons' place, though. Adults got a kick out of the whole thing, too. People came from all over town just to see it. It was a tradition, an unspoken agreement that their house was the place to be on Halloween night. But last year, something changed. When I pulled up to Maple Street after work on Halloween evening, the decorations were there, just as over-the-top as ever. Plastic skeletons hung from trees, the lawn was dotted with glowing pumpkins, and a life-sized witch cackled on their porch. Yet something was off. The house was dark. Not just the lights are off dark, but empty dark. No flickering candlelight from jack-o'-lanterns, no faint glow of a TV behind drawn curtains. More importantly, no sign of the Wilsons. No one stood on the porch, handing out their usual candy bars. The door was shut tight, and though the wind rattled the fake chains strung across their yard, the house itself was eerily still. I figured they'd be out soon. Maybe they were running late or finishing up some last-minute setup inside. So I waited. A few kids wandered up to the porch, tentatively knocking on the door. They waited, then knocked again, but no one answered. I remember one kid, dressed as some superhero, tugging on his mom's sleeve and asking where the candy was. After a while, more people began to notice. A small crowd gathered near the sidewalk, whispering amongst themselves. The Wilsons had never not been home for Halloween. It was like some unwritten law of the universe had been broken. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to knock myself. So I walked up their front steps, pushed past a plastic spider web, and knocked. Nothing. No footsteps, no shifting shadows behind the door. Nothing but the wind and the distant hum of other kids trick-or-treating down the street. I stepped back and looked at the house again. Everything was perfectly in place. The decorations, the little touches the Wilsons always took pride in. Except for them. I went home that night feeling uneasy, but I brushed it off. Maybe something had come up. They were getting older after all. Maybe they went out of town or weren't feeling well. It wasn't until weeks later that things got strange. You see, the Wilsons never came back. Days passed, then weeks. I'd walk by their house every morning on my way to work, and the decorations still sat in the yard, slowly being battered by the wind and rain. The candy wrappers from that night, yes, the ones the kids had discarded when they didn't get their haul, littered the porch, soggy and stuck to the wood. The whole place started to look forgotten. But what unsettled me was how nothing had changed inside. The curtains were still drawn, the mailbox full, but there was no sign of life. By mid-November, rumors started circulating. People were whispering about the Wilsons, how they hadn't been seen since Halloween. No one could remember seeing them pack up or hearing any goodbyes. It was as if they'd just vanished. I wasn't one to buy into neighborhood gossip, but it gnawed at me. One Saturday morning, I went over to their house. This time in daylight, the place looked worse than ever. The decorations that had once been fun now seemed off. The skeletons dangled limply from their strings, and the witch's cackling was reduced to a low, garbled hum as its battery died. The air around the house felt colder and sharper. I knocked again, more out of habit than hope. Nothing. Out of curiosity, I walked around back. The fence was still unlocked, so I let myself into the yard. Their lawn furniture, the garden tools, even the half-empty bag of fertilizer, all of it was there, untouched, as if they'd stepped out for a minute and planned to return. But the door to their house remained closed, silent. I'd never been the type to believe in ghost stories or haunted houses, but there was something about the Wilsons' place that made my skin crawl. Maybe it was how everything had been left behind, like a photograph frozen in time. Or maybe it was the thought that they had vanished so suddenly, so completely, without a trace. Eventually, the town had to get involved. Neighbors called the police for a welfare check, but when they entered the house, they found nothing. No sign of foul play, no signs of a struggle. Just an empty home, as if the Wilsons had simply walked out and never returned. Their car was still in the garage, and their personal belongings, wallets, keys, everything, remained. The officers looked as confused as everyone else. Months passed, and the house became a ghost of itself, standing there like a monument to something no one could explain. People moved on, and kids found new favorite trick-or-treat spots. But every time I passed that house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something had happened to them. The Wilsons never came back. To this day, no one knows why they left or where they went. Before we get into the next story, if you come for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. In 2015, I took my son trick-or-treating, just like we did every year. At the time, he was 6 years old, dressed as a little pirate, his plastic sword bouncing at his side with each step. I remember the excitement in his eyes, the way he held my hand as we moved from house to house, collecting candy. The night was cool, but not too cold, the air carrying the familiar scent of fallen leaves and the flicker of carved pumpkins on porches lighting our way. We'd gone around our usual route, visiting neighbors we knew, and a few new houses too. It was the perfect Halloween night, calm and fun. The neighborhood was lively with other children and parents enjoying the festivities. After about an hour, we found ourselves at a house on the edge of the street. It was a bit different from the others. While most houses were decorated with cobwebs and spooky lights, this one stood dark. There were no decorations, no pumpkins, but a light was on inside. My son tugged at my hand, eager to see if they had candy, so we walked up to the door. I hesitated at first, but I figured maybe it was an older couple who didn't go all out with decorations. We knocked, and almost immediately, the door swung open. An older woman stood in the doorway, smiling warmly. Her gray hair was tied back in a neat bun, and she wore a cardigan that seemed too heavy for the mild weather. Behind her, I could see an older man sitting in a recliner, flipping through channels on a small TV. They looked like your average grandparents, kind and welcoming. "Oh, what a cute little pirate," the woman exclaimed, leaning down to my son. "We have some very special treats inside for children like you." I remember feeling a slight shiver, like something was wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on it at the time. I smiled politely and took a step back, holding my son's hand a bit tighter. "That's okay," I said. "We're just out trick-or-treating. We'll take candy here if you have some." The woman's smile faltered, just for a second. "Are you sure? It's no trouble. Come inside, and we'll give you something better than candy. We love seeing the children this time of year." There was something in her eyes, something that made my stomach twist. It wasn't fear, not yet, but a strong, undeniable sense that we should not go inside. My son, still innocent to the world, tugged on my sleeve. "Can we, Mom? Maybe they have toys or something." But I shook my head, my voice firm. "No, we're okay. Thanks, though. Happy Halloween." I turned us both around, my heart beating a little faster as we walked back down the path. The woman stood at the doorway for a long time, watching us go, and I couldn't help but glance back. Her smile had vanished completely, her face now blank, expressionless. As we moved away, I felt my skin crawl. I couldn't explain it, but something about the encounter stayed with me, even as we continued trick-or-treating. I didn't mention it to my son, of course. He was happy and oblivious, running up to every house and yelling trick-or-treat with the same energy as the first stop. That night, after we returned home and sorted through his candy, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. My mind kept wandering back to that house, to the woman and her strange insistence that we come inside. I dismissed it as paranoia. Maybe they were just lonely, I thought. Maybe they genuinely wanted to be part of the Halloween fun. But a few days later, I learned the truth. It was all over the local news. A couple, living just a few streets away from us, had been arrested. The charges were disturbing. They had been luring children into their homes, offering special treats in exchange for the promise of safety and warmth. The details were horrific. Police had found evidence of their intentions, things hidden away in the basement that no one should ever have in their home, especially not with children around. When the news flashed their faces on the screen, my heart stopped. It was the same couple, The same old woman who had invited us inside. The same man who had been sitting quietly in his chair, barely acknowledging us. I sat there frozen, realizing just how close we had come to something terrible. I looked over at my son, playing with his toys on the floor, completely unaware of how narrowly we had escaped. My instincts had saved us that night. I hadn't known what was wrong, but I'd felt it, deep inside. I didn't think of myself as someone who was overly cautious, but that evening, something told me to trust the fear, however small it was. For weeks after, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What would have happened if I had ignored that gut feeling? If I had let my son persuade me to go inside? I kept imagining the worst. It was the end of October, just days before Halloween. My friends Jake and Brian had convinced me to go on a late-night hike to an old abandoned cabin deep in the woods. We had heard rumors about the place for years. People said it was haunted, and locals warned us to stay away. But we were 17 and thought we were invincible. The idea of going out there on a cold fall night was too tempting to resist. The woods near our town were thick and dense. By the time we set out, the sun was already sinking below the horizon, and the sky turned a deep purple. We didn't care. Jake had a flashlight, and Brian carried a backpack with some snacks and drinks. I had my phone, but the signal was terrible that far out. Not that I expected to use it. We were just planning to hike, check out the cabin, and head back before midnight. The trail leading into the woods was narrow, barely visible in the fading light. Leaves crunched beneath our feet, and the air smelled like damp earth and decaying leaves. It was the kind of night where you could see your breath in the air, and every sound seemed amplified. The trees around us stood like towering shadows, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. After what felt like an hour of walking, we came to a clearing. In the middle of it stood the cabin, or what was left of it. The roof had partially collapsed, and the wood was rotting, but it was still standing. The windows were shattered, and the front door hung loosely on its hinges. I felt uneasy just looking at it, but Jake was already pushing forward, laughing like it was a game. We stepped inside, the floor creaked under our weight, and the air smelled musty. Dust covered everything, and the only sound was the wind whistling through the broken windows. It wasn't until we moved further in that we saw the writing on the walls. Strange symbols scratched deep into the wood lined every surface. They were old, but I didn't recognize them. Brian muttered something about it being graffiti from bored kids, but I wasn't so sure. As we explored the cabin, we heard it, a faint rustling noise outside. At first, we thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon. But then we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through the leaves. They stopped just outside the front door. Jake quickly turned off the flashlight, and we stood there in silence, barely breathing. We waited, listening for anything that would tell us what was out there. The footsteps started again, circling the cabin. They were slow and heavy, like someone dragging their feet. We couldn't see anything through the windows. It was too dark. But we could hear it. Someone was walking around the cabin, stopping at each window, pausing as if they were looking in. Jake motioned for us to stay quiet, but my heart was pounding so hard, I was sure whoever was outside could hear it. I glanced at Brian, and I could see the fear in his eyes. Whoever it was stopped at the back of the cabin. For a few minutes, there was nothing but silence. Then we heard the sound of something tapping against the window. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, almost like whoever was out there was trying to get our attention. Jake mouthed for us to move toward the front door. Slowly, we crept toward it, stepping as quietly as we could. Just as we reached the door, we heard the footsteps again. This time they were running. They were coming around the side of the cabin, fast. We threw open the door and bolted outside, not bothering to look back. The forest felt like it was closing in on us as we sprinted down the trail. The sound of footsteps behind us grew louder. I glanced over my shoulder, and that's when I saw him. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, his face obscured by shadows. He wasn't running after us, but he was following, walking slowly, but somehow keeping pace. I couldn't make out his face, but the way he moved wasn't normal. It was almost like he was gliding through the trees, never breaking his steady pace. We didn't stop running until we reached the road. By the time we got there, the man was gone. The woods were silent again, but none of us felt safe.